Tremendous. Tough one to follow, very good. I just want to say, first of all, David, thank you for inviting me to be here, and thank you guys all for having me. Obviously, you may or may not have heard of Labour Growth Group and what we do. We try to focus on pushing the government to be more radical and bold in its policy choices to end economic decline in the UK, which is the driving force of our politics. Whilst we might not be as traditionally associated with, say, the topic of something like reindustrialisation as maybe other groups like Blue Labour, Red Wall Group, that we all work closely with, this is actually something which is very central to our politics as well. And fundamentally, my conception of it is that a country which is as divided against itself by economics as the UK currently is cannot stand in terms of its democratic consent for its economic and political institutions. And you're starting to see that. You start to see that fray at the edges now. So addressing the economic imbalance of the country it's not just a question of we won't get re-elected if we don't do that. I think it's a moral question of some very, very dark things laid down the path of leaving that unaddressed, as the political class has for probably around 2 decades or longer. So there's obviously a lot here, but I think what I'm just going to try and focus on a bit is the concept of industrial strategy as obviously the tool that the government can use to try and address the question of industries in different parts of the country and what we can do to nurture, save, create, thrive those industries. And I think one of the key things is, like, first and foremost, industrial strategy is a word, or is a term that people in Whitehall and Wonks love to bandy about, because it's a very sensible thing to do, have an industrial strategy, and it's a very sort of lofty ambition. You can have a lot of stakeholder engagement and get everyone in the room and see whose favourite thing they think should be favoured. But fundamentally, if it's going to have any meaning, it has to be a political exercise, not a technocratic one. It has to be about what sort of country you want to create with the force of the state. It has to be about the state effectively putting its hand on the scales to tip them in a certain direction. And at the moment, the government has done some good work on this. And what happened in Scunthorpe is a good example of responding to the challenge. But at the same time, we do have an industrial strategy which, for instance, has, I think, 8 sectors in the end, covers something like 70% of the economy. There's a sector plan for financial services. And it would be my contention that financial services does very well without the aid of any kind of government sector planning or intervention of any kind. In fact, probably macroeconomic intervention has been favouring financial services for a very, very long time. So when you're in that world, you kind of think we've not honed in closely enough on the challenge here. And it's very interesting that Richard mentioned chips. We had, over to speak to our group, we had a woman called Heather Bushy, who was one of the senior economists in the Biden administration behind their plans. And she said, we did like 3 industries with the entire might of the US federal government and the largest economy in the world. And you guys are doing like 8 sectors with multiple subsectors, and she's like, it's not going to happen. But the very clear case about chips for them was that there is a strategic imperative for them in creating a semiconductor industry in the United States, because they had the geopolitical question of if China decides to invade Taiwan, the US has no choice but to enter a military confrontation with China, because that is where the entire supply of semiconductors, global semiconductor supply, comes from. So they picked an industry for those strategic and political reasons, and then looked at places where that could be grown and capital could be applied to it. And I think in our conception of industrial strategy, we need to be more focused like that. We need to be much more clear about what kind of industries we want to encourage and where we want to build them, and which ones we want to save or ones that are still in existence. Because again, there are competing points of view on this. Even around Scunthorpe, I had a discussion with a sort of fellow YIMBY type of person who had the point of view that, you know, why do we need to protect? His point was, why do we need to protect the steel supply chain? Ultimately, the supply chain, our steel supply chain, goes through like 4 or 5 allied countries. The actual resilience of it is pretty strong. You don't need sovereign steel manufacturing capability. It's like a waste of, it's just, you have from his point of view, it's a political move. And you know, I thoroughly disagree with that. But you have to make the case about what sovereign capabilities you feel you have to have and why you feel you have to have them from a strategic point of view. And so up to now, a lot of this, I think, the discussion within the party and what has been there in policy is just too woolly and too detached from the hard trade-offs that are actually being involved in doing this. I think the political imperative of doing this is really clear, like good jobs with strong terms and conditions, good pay in communities that deserve that is an imperative of any Labour government to try and pursue that. But another thing which we should be very clear about is that even if we were to be able to come to a conclusion about what we want to do and where we want to do it, the state is currently in no position to do very much of anything. The state capacity in this country is shot to bits. So, you know, the situation in terms of the interaction between Westminster, Whitehall, even the way that the media bubble feeds into that as well, is completely dysfunctional. And actually reforming the state, at least in some very surgical and targeted ways, is probably going to be necessary before you're going to be able to get the state to do anything meaningful for other parts of the country. I can't sort of stress more than anything like how spending time closer and closer to the institutions of government in terms of in terms of Whitehall, how much that systems level problem has become apparent to me. I don't think we'll be able to get the results we want until we tackle that as well. I think another sort of final point I'd like to make is that within the Labour Party we've had a complete hollowing out of any people with actual lived experience of the industry, a lot of the industries we're talking about, like the professional managerial class. It's not just dominant. I mean, it's the whole of the talent pool in terms of from the advisor class through to most elected politicians. I include myself in that. Now, you're not going to be able to design industrial strategy or policies on this that work unless you're actually engaged with the people who understand it directly. So, I mean, there's a much broader and bigger question about, you know, how we once again root the party back in working class communities and how we have people working class, not just people from working class background, people with actual deep experience of these industries through unions, through community leaders, through industry representatives, embedded in the actual process of making these decisions and these policies. I think the stakes of all this are very, very high because as I said at the start, if we don't confront the issue of the economic imbalance of the country, it will not just hobble the ability of the Labour Party to compete as an electoral force. It will tear at the democratic consent for the entire shooting match of politics and economic institutions in this country. So a quote that I've been coming back to for the whole of this conference with colleagues is like, if you want all of this to stay the same, everything is going to have to change. Which is to say that if we want to preserve what is worth preserving about our institutions and our political culture, then we need to be prepared to make very radical change. So I'm just very happy to be here to actually hear from other people and represent our politics. But thank you for having me.